is it so hard to do the little things that would improve my life? And what I've come to realize, and what we'll talk a lot about today, is that the way that our minds are designed to stop you. I don't think I really truly understood what happiness is. And maybe I'm using the wrong word. Maybe the word is the problem. Because I always associated happiness with like parties and laughter and like I'm just like full of joy and I just, it's like this very positive thing. And again, that we are energetic human beings, that we give off energy, we receive energy. We've all had the experience where you walk into like a retail store and all of a sudden something feels off. Motivation's garbage. You only feel motivated to do the things that are easy, right?
Why do you think that is?
Oh, I know exactly why that is. Because I've studied this so much, because for me, one of the hardest things to figure out was, why is it so hard to do the little things that would improve my life? And what I've come to realize, and what we'll talk a lot about today, is that the way that our minds are designed to stop you at all costs from doing anything that might hurt you. And the way that this all happens is it all starts with something super subtle that none of us ever catch. And that is with this habit that all of us have that nobody's talking about. We all have a habit of hesitating. We have an idea. You're sitting in a meeting. You have this incredible idea. And instead of just, saying it, you stop and you hesitate. Now, what none of us realize is that when you hesitate, just that moment, that micro moment, that small hesitation, it sends a stress signal to your brain. It wakes your brain up, and your brain all of a sudden goes, oh, wait a minute, why is he hesitating? He didn't hesitate when he put on his killer spiky sneakers. He didn't hesitate with the really cool track pants. He didn't hesitate with the NASA t-shirt. Now he's hesitating to talk. Something must be up. So then your brain goes to work to protect you. It has a million different ways to protect you. One of them is called the spotlight effect. It's a known phenomenon where your brain magnifies risk. Why? To pull you away from something that it perceives to be a problem. And so you can truly trace every single problem or complaint in your life to silence and hesitation. Those are decisions. And what I do, and what's changed my life, is waking up and realizing that motivation's garbage. I'm never going to feel like doing the things that are tough or difficult or uncertain or scary or new. So I need to stop waiting until I feel like it. And number two, I am one decision away from a totally different marriage, a totally different life, a totally different job, a totally different income, a totally different relationship with my kids. Not like one decision, I'm divorcing you in the marriage example, but one decision on, you could be having a conversation with your spouse and you feel your emotions rise up, and within a tiny window, those emotions can take over and can impact how your marriage goes. Or you can learn how to take control of that micro moment and make a decision to act in a way that actually shifts your marriage. Your life comes down to your decisions. And if you change your decisions, you will change everything.
When you talk about happiness, it sounds like you believe you deserve it, and you sound like you believe it's yours for the taking. Like it's like it is a clear goal, direction, it's there.
Yeah.
And I think what's happened is subconsciously or consciously, so many of us don't feel we deserve happiness, or we don't feel we're worthy of happiness, or we actually think mediocrity is a safer place to live because then we don't have our expectations being unmet. We don't have the fall of, I wanted this, but I got this.
Right.
And so I had a friend the other day who sent me a message and he said, take a look at this. And it was all about how really we shouldn't strive for happiness. We should strive for mediocrity, because mediocrity is where most people will end up.
I don't think I really truly understood what happiness is. And maybe I'm using the wrong word. Maybe the word is the problem, because I always associated happiness with like parties and laughter and like I'm just like full of joy and I just, it's like this very positive thing. And again, I am a positive person. I'm a very optimistic person. But if you were to put a speaker on my head and broadcast the things I said to myself, you would literally check me in to the 7th floor at Mass General Hospital in Boston, Massachusetts, because it was a constant drumbeat of negativity. And as I, one by one, Jay, started to fix the problems in my marriage and my finances, with my anxiety, as I built a business, a lot of people are surprised to learn that most of what you see that I've built has been built in the last 6 years, literally. And so as I started fixing things outside, that default drumbeat did not go away. It just was a situation where I no longer had anything outside of me that was rationally wrong. So I turned it back on me and just started hammering me. So I personally believe that we are all born. The second you come out and into this world, you are hardwired with this natural intelligence that is your own personal inner compass. And that it is tuned into what is unique to you. It is constantly programmed by the experiences of your life, but it is always signaling toward what is uniquely aligned for you. If you just accept the premise that we are energetic human beings, that we give off energy, we receive energy. We've all had the experience where you walk into like a retail store and all of a sudden something feels off. That is the compass I'm talking about, signaling to you based on your experience, based on your DNA, based on the generational wisdom that is passed down through your ancestors, that there is something there for you to pay attention to. The problem is not what your inner compass is telling you. And the problem is that you won't listen to it. And I can prove it because if you have somebody that comes up to you and says, oh man, I've been in this relationship and that relationship and the other thing, and I'm just unlucky in love and I can't trust myself and I I always say to somebody, stop. It's not that you can't trust yourself, because your instincts have always been right. I want you to go back through the 5 or 6 horrible relationships that you just had. And I want you to look backwards. And the fastest way to do this is look back through your photos, and that'll take you back on the timeline, and that'll remind you of all this stuff. And I want you to look at your face, and I want you to just be honest with yourself. When did you know this wasn't working? And you will always have somebody admit that they knew 7 years before the divorce. They knew a year before the breakup. They knew before they even hooked up with the person the first time that this was probably not the right thing, because it felt a little off, but it was confusing because, you've got all the like rush of the adrenaline and the attraction and all the hormones and all that stuff. But deep down inside, if you got really quiet, you knew that this was not the right decision for you. And so the issue isn't the accuracy of your inner wisdom. The issue is your courage in following it. Because following your inner wisdom and making decisions that are aligned with what you are meant to do in your life, the kind of people you're supposed to be with right now, the kind of support that you need, the things that are interesting to you, it always requires you to do something different than what you're doing now. Because your mind is designed to do 3 things. Your mind by design does just 3 things. It basically regulates your body to keep you alive. It also, when you're sleeping, half of your mind shuts down and the other half catalogs everything that happened to you today so you can have memories. You cannot change another person. People only change when they're ready to change. And if what it requires is more pain, or hitting a rock bottom, or the stakes becoming so high that somebody sees the cost of continuing to self-sabotage or to go on the path that they're going down, I just remember feeling this massive sense of despair. And my entire life and this is probably the long-winded answer to the first question that you gave me, changed with one 5-second decision. And now what my job is I teach people around the world the power and the science behind making 5-second decisions. And if you are paying attention, you will start to notice that there's a 5-second window for all of us. There's a 5-second window between the moment that your inner wisdom, your instincts, your second brain, your gut, whatever you want to call it, all of that unique power that's in you, that comes from your DNA, that comes from your life experiences, that comes from, everything that you've learned in your life, situational intelligence, all of that, when it speaks to you and tells you to move, to speak, to take some form of action, you only got 5 seconds to move before your mind will talk you out of it, because your mind is designed to do 3 things. Your mind, by design, does just 3 things. It basically regulates your body to keep you alive. It also, when you're sleeping, half of your mind shuts down and the other half catalogs everything that happened to you today so you can have memories. And the third thing that your mind does is it protects your ass. And the main way that it does that is it does that by magnifying risk. Magnifies any situation or any conversation. And so, what happened for me is I realized, as my life was circling the drain and we're facing bankruptcy and Chris is on the couch, that this was not the situation that I wanted. I didn't want my life to end in divorce. I didn't want to be in financial ruin. I didn't want to be depressed. I didn't want to be anxious. And here's the truly screwed up thing. I knew what to do to fix it. See, this is the trap that most of us are in. Most of us know what we could do to change things for the better. And we spend our time and our energy talking ourselves out of doing those things. And the other thing that I convince people of, because this is so true, it's the littlest stuff. The little things make all the difference. And I could spend hours with you explaining the science of confidence and explaining the science of risk and explaining the science behind courage and explaining habit loops and how they get encoded in your brain. You don't need to know any of that because you're not applying for a PhD in psychology. I have done the work, and what I know is that true change comes down to 5-second windows. That moment that you know you need to do something that feels slightly uncomfortable, and your resignation, your excuses, your self-doubt start cranking up in your head, you gotta move. You have to move. And so what happened for me is I invented a hack, a brain hack. It's the stupidest thing in the world. And it turns out that it's actually tremendously profound and powerful at a neurological level and at a scientific and a psychological level. When I invented it, I had no clue what I had invented. And it took me about 3 years from the moment that I invented it to actually realize that, holy shit, I think I've discovered the secret to changing anything. You cannot change another person. People only change when they're ready to change. And if what it requires is more pain, or hitting a rock bottom, or the stakes becoming so high that somebody sees the cost of continuing to self-sabotage or to go on the path that they're going down, that, for some people, is the only moment in time where they see that they want things to be different. And you can't want somebody's sobriety or their healing or their financial freedom more than they do.
Because at the very bottom, we learned 2 things. As you said there, the cost of continuing, but also the reward of change is never greater. When you're at the very bottom of the mountain, it's like the cost of continuing down here, plus also the reward of me climbing that mountain are at maximum.
Yeah, and look, we're having an intellectual conversation, and the fact is it's really hard to change.
Yeah.
If it were easy to develop great habits or change your mindset, and it could happen like that, everybody would have 6-pack abs. Everybody would have 4 companies like you do. Everybody would have a hit podcast. Everybody would have their dreams come true. And it is very difficult to change because we are hardwired to spot patterns that seem similar and to repeat them. And so I do think it's important to say that if you're struggling, if you're frustrated with yourself, if you're at that point where you're so sick of yourself and your excuses, I've been there, Stephen's been there. This is a normal part of the human experience. And at some point, either the pain is going to get big enough, or you're going to bump into somebody's story somewhere on this planet who has been in the position that you're in right now, facing the stuff that you're facing right now. And there is something about their story at this exact moment in time that will ignite something in you that is missing. And what is missing in you right now is hope. Because when you're stuck and when you are on a downward spiral, whether it's just in your own head or it's in self-destructive behavior, the thing that's missing in your life is hope. You don't believe right now that anything is going to make a difference. And so until you get to the point where you just hate what you're doing so much that it's worth trying, or you have somebody crack open a door and just a little light comes in and you have this moment where you go, well, what if? What if this is the time sobriety sticks? What if I go to therapy and I actually do change the way that I think? What if I could recover from this narcissistic abuse that I've, been kind of struggling with after that relationship or that marriage? What if I could get out of debt? If that person did it, maybe I could do it. And without either hope or that kind of rock bottom moment, I don't think you're going to change. Because I think confidence is this willingness to try and this belief in yourself and what you're trying to do, right? I think arrogance and conceitedness is thinking you're better than everybody else.
Yeah.
The reason why I wanted to launch the Mel Robbins podcast is not so that it could become the #1 podcast in the world. Of course I have those goals. Of course I want to be the #1 female podcast host in the world. Of course that's what I want. But the reason why I am pursuing this is because I wanted to connect with people at a deeper level. So I personally believe that we are all born. The second you come out and into this world, you are hardwired with this natural intelligence that is your own personal inner compass, and that it is tuned into what is unique to you. It is constantly programmed by the experiences of your life, but it is always signaling toward what is uniquely aligned for you. If you just accept the premise that we are energetic human beings, that we give off energy, we receive energy. We've all had the experience where you walk into like a retail store and all of a sudden something feels off. That is the compass I'm talking about, signaling to you based on your experience, based on your DNA, based on the generational wisdom that is passed down through your ancestors, that there is something there for you to pay attention to. The problem is not what your inner compass is telling you. And the problem is that you won't listen to it. And I can prove it because if you have somebody that comes up to you and says, oh man, I've been in this relationship and that relationship and the other thing, and I'm just unlucky in love and I can't trust myself and I I always say to somebody, stop. It's not that you can't trust yourself, because your instincts have always been right. I want you to go back through the 5 or 6 horrible relationships that you just had. And I want you to look backwards. And the fastest way to do this is look back through your photos, and that'll take you back on the timeline, and that'll remind you of all this stuff. And I want you to look at your face, and I want you to just be honest with yourself. When did you know this wasn't working? And you will always have somebody admit that they knew 7 years before the divorce. They knew a year before the breakup. They knew before they even hooked up with the person the first time that this was probably not the right thing, because it felt a little off, but it was confusing because, you've got all the rush of the adrenaline and the attraction and all the hormones and all that stuff. But deep down inside, if you got really quiet, you knew that this was not the right decision for you. And so the issue isn't the accuracy of your inner wisdom. The issue is your courage in following it. Because following your inner wisdom and making decisions that are aligned with what you are meant to do in your life, the kind of people you're supposed to be with right now, the kind of support that you need, the things that are interesting to you, it always requires you to do something different than what you're doing now. The problem is, if it requires you to do something new, what's also going to happen is you're going to have a fear response. And we mistake those moments of change, or those moments where you're going to try something new, the moments of vulnerability, the moments where you're going to risk a little, the moments that require courage. We mistake the very natural response to change, which is a little moment of feeling alarmed, with your intuition being wrong. And so one way that you can tell the difference is the feeling of the decision. If the decision is the right decision, in terms of a decision that is aligned with who you are and your soul and your DNA and just this deep wisdom inside you, even if it's scary, you will feel a sense of expansion. You will feel like something is growing, that there is possibility, even though you're nervous about it, even though you're not quite sure where you're going to go. If the decision is wrong, when you get quiet and you drop in, you will feel a sense of shrinking. You'll feel constrained. You'll feel a little depleted in your energy. And we often mistake that kind of nervousness that you feel before you make a decision to quit your job, or a decision, you know what, I'm going to get serious about my finances. I'm going to stop going out to the bar on the weekends, and I'm going to commit to listening to this podcast 2 hours every weekend to start learning and start mastering skills, and to literally put these things that I want first. Now, on Friday night, when your buddy's calling, like, hey, we're going down to the pub, you want to come? When you are about to say no, you're going to feel that rise up, because you've never done this before. You always go and you know you're going to get blowback. But if you get really quiet and you drop in and you ask yourself, okay, if I were to go to the bar tonight, does that feel like something expansive? Or does that feel like something that's shrinking me a little bit? And you'll know the right answer for you. And that's a tool that I have used over and over and over again in my life to know what to do. It doesn't answer how. It doesn't answer when. It answers what.
What is the difference between a dream and delusion?
When you talk about delusion, what I hear is like arrogance and conceitedness. Now, and let me explain the difference here. Because I think confidence is this willingness to try, and this belief in yourself and what you're trying to do, right? I think arrogance and conceitedness is thinking you're better than everybody else.
Yeah.
And so when you frame the delusion as this grandiose thing, it feels like it's coming from insecurity.
Right.
It feels like it's coming from wanting to be better than, versus coming from a place where you're willing to take the risks and try and get on the court of life in a way that's aligned with this thing inside you. And so that's what I process in my own brain when you ask me the question, what's the difference between dreams and delusions?
Yeah.
Now, if you have a true dream, is it ever delusional? And my answer to that is never. And here's why. I believe that dreams are not meant to be achieved. I believe that your dreams are a directional signal. That the dream is out there in a different chapter of your life, calling you from this moment toward that direction. And that the reason why you still have this burning flame inside you that relates all the way back to something that you did when you were younger that you frickin' loved is because when you walk toward acting and what that requires of you to get on the court and walk toward that dream. And look, the dream could be an Oscar. The dream could be something like that's an award. It doesn't matter. It's in the lane of acting. What I believe about dreams is that the dreams are deeply personal. They are connected to that flame inside you. You were hardwired with them when you were born. It is absolutely part of why you're curious about things, why you're interested in things. Naturally, this is part of your natural intelligence. And that when you get on the court and you start walking toward them, That is what's supposed to happen, because if you allow yourself to take on some roles in acting, it's going to make something come alive inside of you. That's the purpose of your dreams. It's to make that flame burn brighter inside of you. It's about you awakening something, and your dreams are the directional signal that are trying to point you in what way to move forward. Going back to my daughter, will she ever have a stadium tour? I don't freaking know. She might. That's not the point. The point is to have something come alive inside herself by getting on the court of her life and writing music and putting it out there.
Yeah.
Whatever happens, happens. The reason why I wanted to launch the Mel Robbins podcast is not so that it could become the #1 podcast in the world. Of course I have those goals. Of course I want to be the #1 female podcast host in the world. Of course that's what I want. But the reason why I am pursuing this is because I wanted to connect with people at a deeper level. I knew that I would come creatively alive. I knew that I wanted to build an ongoing conversation that was deeper. And I also knew I wanted to learn more, because when you're constantly putting out content, or you're standing on stages, or you're writing books, it's kind of a one-way conversation.
Yeah.
And so part of my solve for loneliness was to stop griping about it to myself and to go, well, what would actually make me feel more connected? What would be of more service to people? What would create a deeper impact? That's why I'm doing this thing.
Yeah. That's what I'm getting at. That the clarity, and the reason why I really want to get this really clear for people is that I had a friend last night I was talking to, and they want to start a podcast, and it was the most beautiful intention, right? Everyone wants to start a podcast today. Everyone wants to start anything today.
And they
right?
should.
Like it's very and they should. But what I've learned is that anything I've started intentionally has not only more likely brought out the consistency and creativity for me, it's not only been successful, it's also made me happy. And so what I'm trying to get to is, how do you plant a seed that goes all the way from not only growing consistently to giving you joy as it grows, to then giving you that flower, to then giving you that fruit, to then giving you the seed to do more, rather than like, I got the flower, we then cut it, it then broke. And, so when I look at it, I go, I think a lot of people are so obsessed with the result that all they get might be the result. And then you have nothing else. And then that result feels dissatisfying. It's like when we had Gwyneth Paltrow on the podcast, she talked about how like winning an Oscar in her teens, like removed all aspiration, because she goes, well, what do you do next, right? Like when you've done that, you've done the epitome, the peak of that career in your teens. And now it's like, well, what do you do next? And it's like, well, if it was only about the result, not speaking about her, but if it was only about the result, then you stop. And so I just want to clarify that what you just said is you started it not to be #1. You started it because of the impact you wanted to make, the stories you wanted to tell,
Totally.
the connection with your audience. And I think if people leaned more into that, to me, that's the real dream.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I keep bringing up my daughter because she's an artist.
Yeah.
And when she leans into the fact that she's not trying to impress her friends in her pop music program, she's not trying to impress anybody.
Yeah.
She wants to tell stories with her music that inspire people.
Yeah.
And when you really get into the reason why you're doing something. So I'm going to give everybody another visual, because there are two visuals that I think about a lot in life. For me, one of the most powerful things that I use to coach myself is that when I'm in the middle of something, I always remind myself I'm on the bridge. So in launching this podcast, something I've been thinking about for more than 8 years, something I've talked myself out of for a long time, something that I finally stepped on the court and started working for about 2 years ago, and now we are here. I know that this is literally step 1 on a long suspension bridge that is leading me somewhere. And when you remind yourself that you're just on the bridge, you stop focusing on how long is it going to take and what's it going to feel like, and I'm not there yet. You are on the bridge, and you are going to be on the bridge until you get to this other side. And then guess what happens when you get to the other side? There's another freaking bridge.
Yeah.
Every single episode is like its own bridge.
Yeah.
The other visual that I use a lot is a trail leading up a mountain. Because the research is so conclusive, and Jay and I can try to beat it into your head, that meaning comes from working on something. I'm going to say it again. Meaning comes from working on something with intention that has importance to you. It's that simple. You can create meaning in your life by planting a garden if it's important to you. And for me, I think a lot about, the act of going for a hike. The purpose of going for a hike, ironically, is not to get to the top. It's to be on the trail. And if you constantly stare at the top, you're going to be out of breath. You're going to tell yourself you have so much longer. When are we ever going to get there? And you're going to miss the entire point of your freaking life, which is the ride, the trail, the bridge, the mile markers, all of it. And so part of my desire to be happier is to continually remind myself, it is not about getting on that mountain, because when you get to the top of that mountain, the top of one mountain's just the bottom of another one. And if you're going up, eventually you got to come back down. Like, that is just life. If you focus on the freaking trail, whatever step you're on, and you keep reminding yourself, this is going to lead me somewhere, that is where the meaning comes in your life. Because Jay and I will both tell you guys that you put all this effort into writing a book, it publishes, you're like, okay, now what?
Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah.
And we want it to be something else. We want to think that there is this silver bullet that if you get to the mountain, if you launch the podcast, if you meet the person of your dreams, then you'll be happy. And the truth is, for me personally, happiness was really about ending campaigns of misery in my mind. It was about identifying where I was arguing against myself and my potential. And it was allowing myself to get back on the trail or start walking across that bridge.
Talk a bit about your community, because reading some of their comments, it's crazy how many people, like the sheer volume of people you quote in your book, but if you also go online and just look at the people that are like directly reaching out to you, it is an avalanche of people that have stories around the 5-second rule.
Well, one of the reasons why I'm so excited about this book, and look, you don't have to buy the book. This is an idea that you can use. It's free. It's backed by science. More than 8 million people around the world have discovered it. And you're talking about the number of people. We've heard from more than 100,000 people in 80 countries that are using this rule. We know of 11 people who have stopped themselves from killing themselves using this rule.
I saw one of those outreaches.
Yes, there's a guy, Steve, that wrote to us who was a veteran. He was suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. He boarded a ferry overseas with the intention to jump over. He walked over to the railing,
Gave me the chills.
and his inner wisdom kicked in. In that moment, the 5-second rule, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, counting backwards, moved away from the railing, asked for help, saved his life. His story has inspired countless other people that have heard me in the speeches that I give around the world about this one tool. And so, the thing that's so cool about this, and I should tell you the science behind it, because I'm going to be honest with you, it is stupid. Had I ever thought that I would find myself 8 years after discovering it, spending my days telling people about the 5-second rule? First of all, I would have picked a different name, because it reminds you of the one where you have to pick up food within 5 seconds off the floor, right? It was my secret weapon. This was something I did. I never intended to tell anybody, because I went from getting up on time and waking up on time to shaking up my entire life. Because when you understand the power of a 5-second decision, and you understand that you always have a choice to go from autopilot to decision maker, everything in your life will change. You will be a different negotiator. You will be different in sales. You will be unstoppable in the gym, because you will realize the amount of garbage that you put in the way of your hopes, of your dreams, of your potential, of your confidence, of your courage. Everything comes down to the decisions that you make. We all know what to do. None of us know how to make ourselves do it. So I started researching it. Why does something so stupid work? Why? Why does something so silly create such powerful and profound change? Well, here's why. The rule is a form of metacognition. Metacognition is a fancy pants term that means something real simple. You can outsmart your own brain in furtherance of goals.
Agreed.
There are tricks that you can use that actually outsmart the tricks your brain plays on you in furtherance of a higher purpose. We all know this. You can restrain yourself if you're in a situation that calls for it. You can jump into a raging river to save your dog or your kid. You can direct yourself in ways if it's important to you. And so the rule, what it does is it does something really remarkable. When you count backwards, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, what you're actually doing is you're interrupting what researchers call habit loops that get encoded as closed loop patterns in your basal ganglia. That's the part of the brain where your feelings, where your emotions, every habit that you have, which is nothing more than behavior that you repeat that you don't even think about.
I've heard it referred to as a gearbox.
Yeah.
To shift your attention from
Yes.
one place to another.
And so when you go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, it interrupts what's going on here that's spinning without you thinking, and it moves and awakens your prefrontal cortex. So when you hit 1, your habit has been interrupted. So you've interrupted self-doubt. You've interrupted maybe snapping at your kids. You've interrupted the desire to grab for a drink. You've interrupted procrastination. You've also, by counting backwards, done an action. It's awakened your prefrontal cortex. That is the part of the brain that you need that's awake when you're changing behavior, when you're learning new things. When you hit 1, it's also a prompt. So in the language of research, you'll hear people talk about starting rituals. That is something that's proven to help you learn a new habit. The 5-second rule, when you repeat it, becomes a starting ritual that triggers you to act with confidence, that triggers you that this is a moment for courage, that triggers you to shift gears. And because you've also done the manual work of awakening the part of the brain that you need to change, you've set yourself up for success. It doesn't work if you count up, because you can keep going. And also counting up doesn't require focus. If you count backwards, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, it, again, awakens the prefrontal cortex and it prompts you to move. When you start to use it and then you read about it, you'll see that it's being used all over the place. They use it in the armed services in order to align troops and get them to start an exercise. They use it at elementary schools, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, at big assemblies to get a huge room full of kids to stop talking.
A really simple and interesting example, yeah.
Because it requires you to focus. It's not a habit. It will become a habit that prompts you to have confidence and courage. But in the beginning, it interrupts patterns of behavior that you do on autopilot. It helps you assert control, and it teaches you how to become the kind of person that moves from thinking about something to actually doing it.